Good evening or good morning, depending where in the world you're joining us from. Welcome to a new TalkX by Santander X Explorer. I'm Enrique Burgos, Director of Innovation and Growth of A Little Better Co. And tonight I'm going to be your host. Um, you are part of a global community of over 8,000 entrepreneurs across 13 countries, part of this amazing program from Santander. And people who are not just talking about changing the world, you are the ones who are actually building towards it. And that's really tells me a lot about who you are. So tonight the conversation is going to be for you. We are lucky to have our guest here. I'm going to introduce him in a minute. And I want just to let you know that there's something I've seen over and over in the world of entrepreneurships in the last years of my career, and it goes something like this: founders like you invest in tech or in legal or in operations, in finance, and then the majority of times you leave creativity or narrative or storytelling for later, and for when it's more time, and also when will be more money to invest on it. And that, based on our experience, uh, is one of the most expensive mistakes you can make on these early stages of your projects or startups. Something we will discuss this night is that creativity is not a luxury; it's an accelerator. And tonight we're going to talk about exactly this and how to use it strategically from day one. And to have this conversation, I have a good friend of mine who has spent years building this space. He's the founder and CEO of A Little Better, a creative accelerator that works with mission-driven organizations around the world. And he has an incredible background of storytelling, creative production in different industries, pharma and others. And he has been able to translate all this into a framework that helps lots of founders in the US, in Latin America, and in Europe to unlock clarity, momentum, and real world impact. Please welcome Simon Rogers. Hi, Simon. How are you?
Hi, good evening, good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are. It's good to be here.
Thank you. Thank you for your time to be here. Lucky me for being close to you in the last years. And I think we're going to have a great evening today discussing about the importance of creativity. Before going into frameworks and models and into the presentation, I want to ask you something more personal. When was the exact moment that you realized that creativity wasn't just a form of expression, but actually a business tool? What made you change your mind and make a switch to make this happen?
Oh, that's a wonderful question. I think similar to the way that you kicked this off, we've been observing a pattern that's been growing over and over for years. I've been in this space for over 20 years, and I've seen consistently that organizations who focus on the way that they position themselves, package themselves, and promote themselves are the ones who become successful, whether or not they have the best solution. And there were so many instances throughout my time that I saw really compelling, interesting, new and novel ideas fail, and not so compelling, interesting ideas succeed. And the difference often came down to the way that they connected with the end audience. And after spending so much time figuring out how we use creativity to spark emotion, how we get people to see something, desire it, make it tangible, accessible, it occurred to me, not in one moment, but over the course of the past decade, this is one of the most critical tools we have, and it is criminally misunderstood in terms of its role. Like you said, it's not a luxury. It is the difference between organizations who are successful and those who aren't. And the reason why we're excited to be talking with you today is this is a community of people who are trying to make the world a little better. And our entire model is built around using creativity to do just that.
Oh, great. Thank you. Thank you, Simon. And building on that, At ALBC, your company, where I'm part of also, we talk a lot about creativity as an accelerator, not just a decoration. That is, the majority of companies just sees as this way. But let's be honest, if a founder has his early startup and needs to prepare a pitch for in 2 weeks, and the product is not finished, why they should is spend a single minute thinking about creativity? What will be your advice on this?
Yeah, it's a wonderful question, an age-old question, and I want to answer it in two parts. First and foremost, for some reason over the course of the past, again, decade or so, if not more, the role of creativity has been reduced to what we often associate to be tactics, logo, design, web interaction, the way that it looks or feels when you engage with it, the narrative, the storytelling, the actual words that you use. And the reality is, creativity is the ability to see that which doesn't exist and then know how to make that vision real and tangible and accessible and desirable to the end audience. So the second part of the answer is, for the hundreds, if not thousands of founders out there who are racing to get their technology working, to get, all of the tools that they need in order to make sure operationally they're ready to execute their idea, don't forget that the people you need to convince are more interested in the way that your idea makes them feel than the technicality of whether or not everything is buttoned up. If you can convince them of your vision and the transformative impact it could have, they won't care necessarily as much if there are some technical details that still need to be resolved. And this is the classic founder challenge. So you've got a 90-day sprint. Your focus is on making sure all of your technology is buttoned up and working. And then you forget, I still need to inspire the person that I'm trying to convince that this is a good idea. And so what we're going to talk about today is swapping the prioritization of how you think about what you're focused on, to remember that the most important thing is getting other people to see your vision, believe in it, get on board with it, and know that you can then resolve a lot of the other technical issues that typically become top priorities. Does that make sense?
Total sense, and I cannot wait until see your full speech. So I just encourage people to pay attention for the next minutes, and please keep your questions. Ask us on the different sessions where you are watching this event, and we will answer after the Simon's presentation the questions you can make us. So Simon, floor is yours, and go ahead, please.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Enrique, as you know, I tend to just kind of continue talking. So if you do need to interrupt me, please feel free to do so.
Sure.
Enrique and I have had the pleasure of working together for a while now, and there is so much to cover, and we have a limited period of time. So what we're focusing on today is that core narrative, creativity, defining what it means, understanding the unbelievable power it has to help you go from idea to actual funded execution, and understanding how it accelerates impact. So we are among a group of people who believes that we can make this world a little better, right? This is a growing movement of people who have said, you know what, the systems that got us here, they're not working. They're not good enough. We can do better. We can build better systems, better tools, better solutions. And what we're talking about today is the role of creativity in going from, wouldn't it be great if the world worked this way, to making the world work this way. And the criminally misunderstood bridge that creativity bridges from having a really great product to a movement that changes the world. So today, just by way of wayfinding, just out of curiosity, because everybody's different, there are a number of different stall points we'll talk about and kind of dissect the role of creativity in getting over common stalling points or ways that people get stuck. We'll talk about positioning, or the way that you choose to articulate where your product fits in the context of the bigger ecosystem. We will talk about branding, the most often referred to version of creativity. We will talk about awareness, how we make sure that your end audience comes to understand or see or otherwise engage with what you're doing. We will talk about scaling what you're doing. We'll talk about forming partnerships that can go from being able to do what you need to do to being able to expand what you need to expand. And of course, how you find the right talent to make sure that you can realize your vision. And I'm just curious, and think about this as we get to the Q&A, what stall point you are individually looking at, that you're stuck at, that you probably didn't think, maybe if I focus on creativity, I can get over the stall point. But that's what we want you to think about. When we get to the Q&A, think about which of these areas is where you are most stuck, okay? So as we go through, we're going to get right off with the scariest statistic of all. As per the latest measurements that we've been able to gather, 90% of impact-oriented startups will fail within their first year. Okay, so of all of the people on this call, the statistic says 90% of you will fail. 90% of you focused on impact-oriented missions, I should say, will fail within the first year. Our goal is to make sure that doesn't happen. We are not starting with this in terms of telling you should give up. We are starting on this specifically to say it's time to rethink what your focus is, your prioritization, and why this statistic is so high. Now, this is a quote that ties back into what Enrique said when he kicked off the call. At the beginning, your product is unfinished, your team is small, your budget is tight. The one thing you can control is how clearly you communicate what you're building and why the world needs it. So if we go all the way back in time and you think about the way that information was transferred between humans, it was all about storytelling. And this may sound really silly, but if you think about humans thousands of years ago sitting around a fire telling stories, why did some stories get passed down via generation and others were forgotten? It's because some people knew how to tell stories that would resonate with the end audience, that would get people on board and bought in and to believe something and to want to share it. Whether or not the substance was real, the power of storytelling is innately built into us as humans. And that is the role of creativity, is to get the people that you need to be on board with your idea to want to tell your story. I would argue if you can convince your audience to believe in your story and to want to engage and share your story and support your story, that is far more important than making sure your product is 100% finished, your team is fully resourced, your budget is fleshed out, etc. Because when people believe in an idea, they will figure out how to solve for all the rest. And that is what our focus is. So ALBC, which stands for A Little Better Company, we are a small organization that has been studying the role of creativity and how it's been used first through strategic consultancies like the world-class organizations you're all familiar with, like McKinsey, all the way through the branding and the creative execution from world-class creative agencies like Pentagram and others, and understanding why things worked and why things didn't. And in our own careers, we have been testing what creativity actually can do to take an idea from this sounds really cool to we got funded, we built this, we put it out into the world. What we've come to understand in our time is that there are very common stall points where impact-oriented startups will get stuck. Right? For better or for worse, there are common stall points where organizations are trying to move forward. They're focused on a specific aspect of your product, a technology, et cetera. And then we get to the positioning statement and we just stall out because we never really took the time to think about how we position what we're doing in the context of the way our end user needs to see it. We're thinking about the way that we see it. So what we do is we've been building models to use the power of creativity to help folks get unstuck. And our entire focus is on the systems that we all know need to change, right? Systems affecting the way that humans engage with our planet, systems affecting the way that humans engage with our bodies, the systems involved in how humans interact with one another. And at the risk of getting inflammatory, hopefully everybody has observed the uptick in insanity happening around the world, why that's happening, and how we can get creative in stopping this cycle from getting out of control. We have worked with tiny little startups, nonprofits, global multi-billion-dollar organizations, everything in between, all around the world. And what we continue to evolve and refine is the tools of creativity in terms of helping organizations with new and novel ideas to solve these systemic issues, not get stuck, but to become successful. Technology alone won't transform your business. You may have the coolest technology, you may have something absolutely transformative, you may have accomplished something that nobody has ever done before, but that's not enough. We live in a world where the way you package, position, and promote what you're doing is just as important as the work you're doing. And for better or for worse, the best ideas don't always win. I actually, to be honest with you, I feel weird using the term win. It's a very North American, like, oh, we're going to win or we're going to lose. But the idea of winning is, let's just assume there are over 100 people trying to develop your idea as well. Do you think the one who has the best executed technology is going to be the one who, quote, wins, or the one who did the best job of making sure that their idea was clearly positioned, it was visible to the right people, it was positioned in such a way that they desired to engage with it, and it inspired them through storytelling or whatever the experience may be to want to get on board, to use it, to share it, to fund it, to do whatever it is that you need to make sure you have the infrastructure to be successful. This is the reality, right? It is harder than ever for startups. And my heart goes out to all of you. And I hope that at the end of this session, you are able to walk away with certain mindset that will help you get over a lot of what I assume will be some of the stall points you're stuck with, because capital is tight, competition is fierce, attention spans are shorter than ever, right? You have basically one shot to connect with your audience and get them onboarded with what you're doing so you can focus on what you do best. So let's talk about how we focus on those stall points and get over them. So again, I really want to reemphasize, and at the risk of being overly repetitive, that 90% statistic we shared, those startups are not necessarily failing because they had bad ideas or their ideas didn't work or they didn't have the right resources or capital stack to make their ideas happen. They are often failing because of one of these 5 stall points. So number 1, positioning. The way that an idea is positioned in the world in the context of its competitive landscape and in a way that will be seen and understood and adopted by its audience. Branding, which is the immediate feeling that it conveys to get them to want to engage with the positioning. This is no different than if you're going into an important meeting, you probably take a little bit of time to think about what you're going to wear, because humans immediately draw conclusions, they make judgments, and we are surrounded by higher quality experiences than ever before. So the brand is the clothes that you wear to convey a feeling immediately, and it must be tailored in such a way that within less than 5 seconds, your audience says, I like this, I want to engage with it. Engagement is that next level to make sure that you're not just positioning yourself and presenting yourself in a way that looks good, but opening up the right channels and the right funnel, for lack of a better term, to ensure that your audience becomes an engaged audience and they actually try what you're doing. They actually respond to you. They start a conversation. They use your tools. They test your technologies, etc. And scaling, going from, okay, we've got one quick little test pilot to this is now something we have tested in multiple regions with multiple audiences, with multiple different geographies, whatever the case may be when it comes to how you need to scale your idea. Oftentimes folks think about what's right in front of them and then kind of lose the way when it goes into the conversation about how to make sure new audiences in new areas have the same exact experience or the experience they need to become engaged audiences. And last are transformations. We are in an age where ideas are being combined and merged. We have, of course, everybody is focused on a potential exit strategy, I would suspect, on this call. We have to think very carefully about what that transformation pathway looks like in a realistic way to go from I've got a really compelling idea to I have something worthy of a major transformation, whether that is merging with a symbiotic organization that has complementary resources. Maybe it means getting acquired by an organization so they can realize their vision. Maybe it means combining forces with a bunch of symbiotic partner organizations. Whatever the case is, these are all stall points where really great ideas can get stuck and often fail. And the way we can get through all five of them is creativity. We are big believers that creativity is more important than capital. And we won't have the conversation about capitalism today, but we think, for a myriad of reasons, I would imagine many of you feel this way. The answer is more money, right? We are often wired to think, I need to raise more funds, right? Or if I don't hit this certain investment milestone, we're not going to make it. And what we have to back out, we have to zoom out and realize there have been, $2 million launches that have completely flopped and $20,000 campaigns that have gone absolutely viral. There is not a direct correlation between how well funded you are and how successful you will be. There is a direct correlation between how creative you are and how successful you will be. And the reason is because clarity, the ability to be seen and understood and desired, to be able to position yourself in a way where your end audience goes, oh my gosh, I get it, I want it, let's do it. That's more powerful than any other tool in your toolkit. If you are incredibly well funded, but you are launching out in the world without clarity, like you put your pitch deck out there, you go give an investment pitch, whatever the case may be, if you don't have that foundational clarity, it's just noise, right? It's just being very loud and very well funded. It doesn't mean it's going to work, right? Money scales whatever you're doing, but if you're unclear, you're just scaling confusion. So again, when it comes to these stall points, creativity typically is more powerful than the capital itself. But I want to be so clear again, creativity does not equal design. For whatever reason, we as a society have really reduced the concept of creativity to visual arts, right? Maybe graphic design, logos, the way that something looks and feels when you interact with it, or maybe copywriting, maybe the actual narrative or the storytelling, or maybe multimedia production. We think about creativity in terms of tactics. And so often what happens is somebody says, yeah, I mean, I know we need a better website or we need a better pitch deck or this could look cooler, whatever the case may be, but we need to focus on all of these other things first. So I want to be very clear. Creativity involves all of those tactics, but it is not those tactics. It's the ability to, again, see something that doesn't exist. You are all founders. You can see the world that doesn't yet exist. And creativity is the ability to translate that vision in a way that makes sense to your end audience. So again, I want to sit with that for a second. Creativity is the ability to see a world that doesn't yet exist and to have the tactical ability to translate that vision in a way that is seen, understood, valued, and adopted by your end audience. That is one of the most, if not the most powerful tools in your toolkit. But again, we are trained for whatever reason to think, oh, creativity is just the tactical expression of what I'm doing. And it's really just decoration. So once we get through all this other work, yeah, we'll revisit. Maybe we'll go on Fiverr and get a logo or something like that, right? It is, again, knowing how to communicate to other humans in a way that they get it, they want it, and that all the other details become secondary. Our methodology to employ creativity, the methodology which we've shifted to calling transformation design, but we lovingly have referred to it as the little better methodology. In all reality, it's based on the scientific method. It starts with discovery. Do we understand all aspects of the situation? So let's just say you're facing a stall point, you're having trouble explaining what your vision is, or it takes you, 5 minutes to give your complete elevator pitch, and there's no way that you're able to figure out how to say, look, here's what I'm doing and why you should care about it, in just a couple of seconds. The way that we leverage creativity, again, using this methodology, is it starts with discovery. So we take the time to say, What are all of the different variables at play, and what's the information we can gather? Typically, this involves understanding the psychology of our audience, the end user. And I will pause on this for a moment just to say one very common human problem is that we often focus on what we want and don't take the time to understand what they want. Discovery is taking the time to pretend you're a psychologist, get in the mind of your audience, whatever it is, whoever it is you're trying to engage with, whatever it is you need from them. It really is, what's their motivation? What drives them? What would get them to get on board with what I'm trying to do? What would get them to say yes? We take a look at the competitive landscape. We make sure we understand that while we are focused and head down on what we're doing, there are probably a lot of other folks doing something similar. And we must understand what else is either out there or what else is in development, such that we have a clear picture of who our audience is and the world as they might see it. Because again, I can't see you raise hands if you're able to do so, but this would be a show of hands to the audience. How many times you've pitched something to someone and they asked you, so it's kind of like this thing, and you had never heard of whatever that was because you didn't do a competitive analysis. It's the same thing to make sure that you understand your audience and how they see the world and what they may be exposed to. And essentially, the question we're trying to ask at this stage is, where are they and what are they thinking? And ultimately, how do we get them to see us and do what we need them to do? Whether that's as simple as fundraising or as complex as partnering on how we develop technology or forming a strategic alliance, whatever the case may be, where are they and what is the world as they see it? Where do we need them to get? And that becomes the foundational strategy of how we get them to go from here to there. Again, none of this has to do with what are the logos, the fonts, the colors we need. None of this has to do with how cool it could look or what the swag is, right? We need cooler business cards, whatever the case is. It is the psychological understanding of where our audience is, where we need them to be, and what is the best way to get them there. How do we find them? How do we convince them? What are the questions they're going to ask us or the doubts that they will have? And how do we answer them in such a way that they can immediately get on board and say yes? Then we get to the fun stuff, right? The branding strategy is the way that we build a visual and a verbal identity on top of that strategic direction to make sure that they see us in the way that we want to be seen, to make sure that they can engage the way that we want them to engage. And again, remember, that's your first impression. And we live in a world surrounded by higher quality branded experiences than ever before. So people are now subconsciously trained to judge the quality of something based on their first touch point. You may have the most compelling technological solution to a major problem, but if it's positioned in such a way that you have to be a lab scientist to understand what it means, your end audience isn't going to get it. They're not going to understand why it's so important. And again, branding is the ability to create that impression of seriousness, of legitimacy, of inspiration, the feeling you need them to have to go from where they are to where you need them to get. Then we translate that to the tactical strategy. So what are the things that we need to make? And I just really have to reinforce the point that the tactics are typically where folks start when they think about creativity. Well, I need a logo, I need a website, I need a video, I need a this. You shouldn't even think about talking about the tactics that you need until you've answered 1, 2, and 3. Because otherwise you're just making things that you like. And I hate to break it to you, but you're not your end user. You're not your target audience, right? Even if there may be other people who are like you and similar to you and may want to engage with what you're doing, you have to build everything you're building for them. So the tactical strategy is then we have our foundational strategy to tell us who our audience is and how we get them from where we want them, or from where they are to where we want them to be. And we know the impression, the feel, the visual, the verbal identity that would get them to get on board. What do we need to build to reduce any friction points in terms of them engaging with us? How do we get them to see us? How do we make sure they click on the link? How do we make sure that we've got an infrastructure? And that leads into the content strategy, which is what is the story we need to tell and deliver to them in the right sequence, in the right way at the right time, leveraging the tactics that we've built to make sure that they are actually believers in what we're doing. So again, just to clarify how these all fit together one more time, discovery is making sure you understand the psychological landscape of what's happening. Foundational strategy is how to build your mode that you will convince your audience from where they are to where you want them to be. Your branding strategy is how you will create the overall look and feel and storytelling approach of what you're going to package and position and promote out into the world. The tactical strategy is what you need to build to realize that branding strategy. And the content strategy is what you need to fill in that tactical strategy to tell the story, bring it to life, and get them on board. All of that then leads to the actual implementation and execution. But I want to be realistic here. Going back to a question Enrique said, let's say you've got 90 days here to build a pilot. Do you really have time to do all of those things? You know, nothing is ever perfect, as you as founders know. When we get to do this with multi-billion-dollar global organizations, we can take 6 months, we can take 12 months to go through that process and architect the perfect outcome. But 90% of the time, folks don't have that time or resource to do all of that. So I just want to reinforce the process is always messy. This is an actual illustration to represent the design thinking process where you move forward, you go back, you move forward, you go back, you move forward. The most important thing is that you are constantly thinking in a reference point of what your audience is thinking and what they want, what they need, and what would resonate with them. Right? So even if you do this whole exercise in one day, remember, you're not the target audience. You're not designing something that appeals to you, although hopefully it does. You're building something for them. And it will be an iterative process where you'll get feedback and revisions. It will never be perfect. ALBC, as it is, has been a constant stream of evolution as we continue to better understand where the market's going and the inflection points in front of us. But it's always about who we're trying to communicate with, not who we are. So when we think about the methodology and practice, one thing that's we could talk about is where folks often get stuck in terms of specific positioning points. And actually, Enrique, I know we've got a couple examples of how we've helped organizations reimagine themselves. Before I get into those, would it be helpful to stick on any particular stall points or any particular feedback you might have, or should I roll into some examples?
Yes, I think talking about the style points, you walk us through the 5 most common ones. And I want you to focus on one in particular. I think is probably the most relevant for the audience is the messaging clarity. I think for me, this one is really relevant because in your opinion, what's the most obvious symptom that a founder has a messaging problem? Where can you detect this? And also, why is so hard sometimes when you are on top of the project, inside of the project, working so hard to detect these messaging problems?
That's a wonderful question. Thank you for coming back to this one. So we see this all the time. The industry that comes to mind most is biotechnology or biotech. These are founders who are deeply passionate about certain technological, physiological, indication-specific realms where there are scientific breakthroughs happening and such incredible technical information. And so what they typically do is they communicate around the technicality of what the problem was, what they were able to solve, and what it means. The problem is the vast majority of the population doesn't think in those terms. They are not a bench scientist. They are not somebody with the technical expertise to understand the true impact of having a new method to treat, a certain indication. So we have to zoom out and think about who our end audience is and what they may be feeling, what they may struggle with. And the very simple example is, for a biotech who's got a breakthrough way of, solving a specific rare disease indication, the story is not the method of action. The story is how it transforms the lives of the patients, and the patients in such a way that they may be children of your investors, they may be family, they may be friends, they may be people that your audience can connect with. And so the common stall point is in terms of the way that the message is told time and time again. We see brilliant founders who have incredible technological capabilities, like many of you on this call, I'm sure, who are so excited about what they've built that they forget to focus on why it's important. So I want you to always think about why this matters and not just the what. And I'm going to give you a very silly analogy, but we come back to this one a lot. I think about, we'll think of a very simple industry, but let's think about a company who redesigns kitchens, right? Let's say you want to have your kitchen redone. I know this sounds so silly, but imagine you hired or you brought in two contractors to tell you about their approach to helping you redesign a kitchen. Contractor one is so excited about the tools that they have and the materials that they use and all of the incredible technical capabilities that they have to make cuts and measure and do all of these really cool things. And contractor B shows you the incredible work that they've done and helps you visualize yourself in your future kitchen and makes it real. Contractor A may actually end up doing a better job, but contractor B is going to win that job because they were able to align with the audience. They were able to say, I know what you want and what's important to you. I'm going to tell you, I'm going to tell you about the tools and the technical approaches, but only when it makes sense. And the reason I use that analogy is we see this in technical industries, whether it's technology, biotech, whatever the case may be, where founders are so excited about what they've built, they forget to tell why it's important. So I'm going to give you a very simple 3-part framework to tell your story. What is the situation? What is the challenge? And why do you have the solution? So just by way of example, the situation is what is happening in the world that you need to be aware of to understand why there's a challenge. And that could be as simple as here is a particular rare disease indication, what it means, why it happens. Here's the challenge. The challenge is we are not able to solve this because we don't have capabilities X, Y, and Z. We've tried this, it didn't work. We've tried this, it didn't work. Again, here's the situation, what's happening in the world. Here's the challenge that exists because of that situation. And that brings you to the solution. Here is how we're solving this in a way that brings us along from why there's a problem to what we're doing to solve it. And if you follow that framework, you can remind yourself who is the end user, and who is the end user of this, what do they care about, and then work backwards from there. Yeah, I'll pull out of this. I apologize. We're having a little bit of a delay. Just want to confirm, can you see this? Okay.
Yes.
All right, this may have fixed it. Enrique, is it okay if I quickly go through just some examples in practice?
Perfect. Please.
Okay. So listen, this is a random sampling here, but the reason that we pulled a couple of these out is because it may seem completely antithetical to some of the work that you're doing here. But this is an example of helping an organization rethink how it's positioned in the world based on what its audience is actually looking for. This is a small, sleepy art museum in a quiet little town having a lot of trouble getting folks in the door. And the intention here was to say, why should a new and younger audience want to visit an art museum, and helping them rethink how they're bold and visible and not quiet, but get out in front of people and tell them what they're looking for. You're looking for inspiration. You're looking for a place to be quiet with your thoughts. You're looking for where art and culture meet nature. But again, using the power of creativity to get something that was not visible right out in front of people, and then telling a story that resonates with what they're looking for. We did the same thing for a composer's orchestra that was originally founded to help elevate. Now, I guess this is a very American-focused concept here, but the idea being there were a lot of American-based composers who are using art not just to make music, but to communicate ideas. And the whole idea is that when you're a composer, you're really a communicator. And that when we talk about what it means to be American, it is not just the traditional white male composer architect, but that there are incredible and diverse perspectives, and that music is a way to get that story told in a way that can move movements forward. We did work with these incredible nonprofit organizations that are inspiring high schoolers or younger students to think about what these emerging issues are as they start to get exposed to some of the challenges that youth face all over the world when they're exposed to drugs and alcohol, and how to think about this in a cool way and reframe their mindset. And we get to work with organizations all over the world, again, including, this is a nonprofit based in Africa, where we can help build a bridge for folks to be creative and to get, break out of a cycle that is otherwise incredibly, I want to be very diplomatic and careful with my words, but basically break the cycles that have gotten communities to where they are stuck currently. So with that being said, I'm happy to expand on any specifics. I'm happy to give more examples. These are a little bit more of a sampling of a global touch point, but the big takeaway is that creativity is not a luxury. It is not something that should happen where you say, okay, I've got a little bit of extra money, I've got a little bit of extra time. It is the catalyst. It is the thing that could go from, I've got a really interesting idea, to people know about my idea. They want to engage with my idea. And when you hit one of those stall points, you know how to position yourself in a way that moves you forward. You know how to promote yourself in a way that your audience will see. You know how to engage with your audience in a way that they don't feel annoyed or exhausted because they've had to do this before, right? You can move your idea forward. And the other issues, whether you have the full technological capabilities that you need, whether or not you have all of the funding that you need, they become secondary, because the audiences you need to engage with, they're now engaged, they're promoters, they're believers, they're on board. And that is the power of creativity. So Enrique, if it's okay with you, I'd be happy to answer some additional questions or expand on any of the other stall points.
Great. No, thank you, Simon, for your amazing session. I think it has been really inspiring for everybody. And I want to ask you, before we have any other questions from the audience, I want to just ask you some really practical one. If any of the explorers that are watching us, or they will watch this session later, they are probably in validation phase. What, from your from your point of view, what should be the best thing they could do to start building a stronger creative strategy? What would be these steps they should focus first?
Yeah, the first thing I would recommend you do is get in the mindset of a psychologist and get to know your audience. So when you think about, regardless of what you're trying to build or where you are in the validation process, think about who you need to engage with next and where they're at, what they're thinking, what they're feeling. So the most important thing you can do is to take some time and try to get in the minds of who your audience is at your next major milestone. And then think creatively about, okay, here is where they are. They've probably seen similar pitches, similar things come and go. How do I make sure that they see me or my idea in a different light? How can I differentiate in an increasingly noisy and competitive landscape? So when you think again about what can you do if you just take one day to focus on what's going to happen after you build your product and what needs to happen next, think about who you're going to engage with and what the story is you need to tell them and what you need to show them so that they believe what you're doing. They desire what you're doing. They want to engage with what you're doing. And they feel confident in the idea that you have, even if there are still some technical challenges. Does that make sense?
Total sense, total sense. We have some question for the audience also.
Mm-hmm.
Melissa is asking us, how does your creative process work? If you can explain in few words.
Sure. So going back to one of the earlier slides where we talked about the methodology. So transformation design methodology, really, again, and I'll do a quick summary here. Discovery is the process of making sure you can gather as much information as possible about the challenge you're trying to solve, who you're trying to solve it for, what they're thinking and feeling, and the world that they're living in. So very specifically, when it comes to your competitive landscape, what other solutions might they be exposed to or have been exposed to or will be exposed to? That leads us to what is your best way to differentiate what you're doing. So when we talk creatively, again, I'm not talking tactically, like I need to choose red instead of blue or I need a bigger logo. I'm talking about what is the way that you position your idea to ensure that somebody who's heard maybe similar things says, oh, they get me, they understand me, and I want to learn more. That becomes the foundation of the actual branding or creative strategy as it's traditionally thought, which is how do we use the power of a visual identity and a verbal identity to get them to see us the way that we need them to see us? So, just as an example, if you're working on convincing I'm going to just pull something out of thin air here, but imagine you're working on convincing a potential funder that you have a technology solution nobody else has done before. Think about the fact that they probably received 50 pitches throughout the past month with a similar story. We can do something nobody else can do. So the question might be, is there a bigger challenge that they or their firm is striving to solve that your technology could help them see? And then how do you position that in a way creatively where they go, this feels fresh, this feels different, this feels like somebody who's taking a different approach, and now I'm interested, now I'm invested. And to understand that, we do a visual competitive analysis where we take a look at how brands are evolving, what kinds of styles people are using, what fonts, what colors, and it's all a language. Visual identity is a language, just like messaging identity, where we think about the power of colors and fonts and the way that we combine different things to communicate either confidence or sympathy or different emotions that your end user needs to resonate with. But again, the creative process should be based on them, not what appeals to you. And this is something that I've seen a lot where founders will say, ooh, I really like the way this looks. We should do something like that.
Great.
That's not right. That's not relevant.
So thank you, Simon. Thank you. We have another question we have received about the famous topic of today's live, AI. And the question tells us if in actual world where you can generate content in seconds, and what is the role of human strategic creativity, and if it's still a differentiator or is this still a differentiator between humans and AI, or we are a moment where creativity is going to be just ruled by machines?
Yeah, no, I'm glad whoever asked this question, thank you for asking this question. We've been doing a lot of research and we work in the education field as well, trying to dissect what is the role of AI on the skills that humans will need. And we've just been working with reports from McKinsey, from OECD, from the World Economic Forum. They all say the same thing. When we look out in the future, the ability to execute things, like you said, generate content or tactics in seconds, that's no longer important. The ability to think creatively, to be empathetic and understand other humans, that is something that AI won't really be able to do with the same level of authenticity as real humans. So the most important thing I want you to think about is, yes, we absolutely believe that in the future, AI will be doing the heavy workload of generating the tactics, helping to expand the content series, even automated, posting all of the things that used to have humans doing, which that's a whole separate conversation as to whether or not that's a good thing. But what creativity won't be able to do is everything we talked about up front. Who is my audience? What are they feeling? What drives them? What motivates them? What would get them to say, you get me? And I'm interested. And that type of creativity, the ability to envision a solution that they never thought possible and make it real and tangible and desirable, that's where the true human art of creativity lies. And then we can all tap into whatever your AI tool of choice is to say, now let's execute on this. So we believe the upstream creative strategy is going to become even more important because in a very crowded, noisy world, it's only going to get worse. There's going to be more and more content that looks more and more similar and sounds more and more similar than ever before. So that upstream ability to differentiate and articulate is just one of the most critical human tools there is.
Totally agree with you, Simon. Totally agree. So last question, last minute, we receive a question from Braille Gapau. Mentions, thanks, Simon. Can you delve deeper into the main variables of creativity in a startup? It's a really wide question. uh, But what will be these main variables, or what will you choose as the top variables of creativity? What will impact? What are the main elements of creativity that could impact a startup?
Yeah, I would say, well, first of all, it is a broad question, and we could certainly spend a couple of hours dissecting this one. But when I think about all of the variables that creativity can impact, the number one thing is differentiation. We do oftentimes think about what we're doing with blinders on. So we'll be very focused on what we're doing and not see the bigger picture that there are other people doing similar or competitive things. So differentiation is the ability to say, what is my audience seeing? What are they inundated with? And how do I make sure my idea stands out and above? And then applying that differentiation to, I know this sounds silly and tactical, but how do you use one sentence to explain what you are, what you do, and why it's valuable to the end user? And then how do you translate that sentence into the packaging that you need to communicate that feeling through a visual identity and a verbal identity, and then think about all of the tactics involved, like your website, your pitch deck, etc. So again, if you can get to a point where you say, okay, I understand my audience and what they are being flooded with, and now I can very clearly articulate what makes us different or better or the best ultimate solution, then everything flows from there.
Fully agree with you, Simon. And so this was the last question. I cannot say many times how thankful we are for your presence here, for this interesting session for the explorers. I think has been the exactly kind of conversation founders need to hear, not just about what is creativity, also about when to use it and how to use it in their projects. So thank you, Simon. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon and good evening, depending where you are in the world. And thank you to Santander X Explorers for this TalkX we had with Simon Rogers from A Little Better. Thank you.
Thanks, Enrique. Thanks, everybody.
Sabemos lo difícil que es emprender hoy en día. Si pudieras pedir un deseo que te ayudara con tu proyecto, ¿cuál sería?
I would like my project to gain more visibility.
Conectar con expertos, con mentores.
Seguir conectando con personas, ya sean empreendedores o emprendedoras.
Poder-me conectar com pessoas especializadas na área e com isso conseguir desenvolver o projeto.
Vale, creo que podemos hacerlo. Emprender requiere ganas, constancia y estar rodeado de los mejores. Por eso Santander X Explorer ofrece experiencia emprendedora y una red global de contactos para validar tu idea y convertirla en un negocio sostenible. Santander X Explorer.